to another edition of Kandily Kesha. We are so excited to have you here with us on this chilly Monday night. I hope you all are snuggled at home and warm out of this inclement weather we're having tonight. Long overdue cold weather. Welcome winter. Listen, I have with me tonight Mr. John McMasters, former county commissioner of Chatham County. Mr. John McMaster currently serves as a community activist and one of these individuals who has his finger on the pulse of exactly what's happening in Savannah and Chatham County. And we really appreciate your investment in community. Most of all, we appreciate your investment into our local politicians who listen to you. And speaking of listening to you, you know, John, I connected with you and Chuck Fagan a couple weeks before Election Day. And boy, let me tell you how I regretted not having had the opportunity to connect with you sooner. But in just that short amount of time, I would say that you helped me hit it over the top and make it on home. So, with that, I want to talk about some of what we discussed. It wasn't what to look like and what to sound like on the campaign trail. But what we discussed were those things that were consistent with policies, economic drivers, and those opportunities that would help us effectuate change in a real and lasting way. And with that, one of those policy initiatives was an impact fee. So, John, I want you to tell us and my second favorite council person, and I only say second favorite because y'all know P2 is very jealous. Our Alderwoman at large, Alicia Miller Blakely, is very, very jealous. So I have to say my second favorite. But what I cannot deny and what I have to give her, and I often say it, by far, she is the smartest councilwoman. When I tell you a woman who is married to this work, and who knows our local government inside and out, it is Alderwoman Bernetta Bryant Lanier. Of all of the people who were elected, I was most happy to know that I would be serving alongside her. I knew I would be okay. Alderwoman Lanier, I was just about to go into what policies mean and how we effectuate real change in Savannah. It's not through talking heads. It's not through task force. It's not through those things where we get people all excited. But true change is only done through policy initiatives, policy presentation, and ultimately the adoption of such. And so with that, we know that one of the ordinances we are currently courting and trying to get over the finish line is one that will impact your district, particularly the Highlands in your district, greatly. It's so greatly needed. I wanted John to start in on helping us understand what an impact fee is, why it's important. And he also has the stats and the figures related to how much we've missed out on and how much, if we don't set a moratorium, we stand to lose. John?
Well, Councilwoman, thanks for having me on the show and that wonderful introduction. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's an even greater honor and pleasure to work with you two. And you two seem to be driving and finding the most important parts of your responsibility. A lot of it is being obscured by the razzle dazzle and the bamboozle factor. The mayor is an autocratic guy, and the people that vote with him, I don't think have a chance to think for themselves or speak for themselves. They just follow along. And although you guys are in the minority, you are an independent, free-thinking, and very responsible elected officials. So I salute you on that. Impact fees are a policy that was adopted 30 years ago in the state of Georgia. It is the imposition of a one-time fee on all new construction, whether it's a new car wash or a new home or a new hotel. And if you talk to urban planners and people that do this for a living, they'll tell you that the tax base that's generated by new construction is barely enough to pay into the M&O general fund for the operational costs. There's not enough money in the tax base at the current millage rates to capitalize projects. So for years, we have depended on SPLOST, a sales tax levy and collection, to help fund our capital projects. As you both know, sometimes you all issue bonds to find the financing for large capital projects. And by large capital projects, we're talking about roads, drainage, the arena, libraries, police precincts, purchasing police cars, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, for 30 years, the state of Georgia, many municipalities and cities have adopted impact fees. It's their right and their authority as a municipality or a county to do so. But of course, Savannah Chatham is last to understand the importance of it. Why?
Even in the midst of some of the smaller community cities around us have adopted,
Yes.
like Richmond Hill.
Correct. Effingham, Richmond Hill, even Port Wentworth is now discussing seriously the need for impact fees. Basically, if you don't have impact fees, all the existing residents wind up having to pay extra for the new people moving in. So it's kind of
and the reason why that's important, John, let's stop right there. What you just said is important because take, for example, Alderwoman Lanier, the Highlands. The Highlands is one of the communities that probably is among the fastest growing in Savannah. They have developed and developed and developed without much regard to those things like parks, libraries, even a police department. They just got a fire department. And so when we have one community being developed with multiple units, what's there may be satisfactory for that particular subdivision. But once you start adding 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 additional subdivisions at the same volume, and you still have that one or no police department or no fire department, you have no library, you have no recreation, those current model, what we consider a model community, because by all accounts, people think that the Highlands is a granola community, nothing really happens there, but everything starts somewhere. And if you are not incorporating in tandem to development those pieces that serve as outlets for our seniors, outlets for our youth, then we start having some of the problems that we have in the core of the city.
That's right. I want to make a distinction here because I think it's really important, and that is when your staff, before Jay Milder came on board, and your staff, Bridget Liddy and Heath Lloyd, took the first cut at impact fees, it was astonishing to me that their approach was an overlay micro plan to utilize the impact fee monies. And as much as I know the Highlands has been neglected, the superior, more fair approach is service district. I think if you read the code, there's two distinctions. There's the project district, which is the developers, 200 homes, and then there's the service district, which really is the entire city. So a good impact fee schedule would never be limited just to, that's essentially a tax allocation district. or business improvement zone. I mean, there are
Right.
other mechanisms. You don't want to hobble or retard your impact fee collections by defining it so that the builder gets his park and his drainage and his subdivision streets all covered with the impact fee. That's it's got to be broader based than that. And I'd
Right.
also like to make the distinction so that people understand something. And I'll try to make an analogy here. In our bodies, we have little tiny blood vessels, and we have major arteries, femoral arteries. The impact fee policy is a femoral artery in the architecture of policy and importance at your level of what you're doing. It's not a tiny little capillary or surface blood vessel. This is fundamental architecture for a more fair and equitable community. People that move here should pay their fair share. And we have enough people already here, like SCAD, who aren't paying their fair share.
Right.
So anyway, $700 million a year is what the city recorded for 2019 and 2020. I haven't seen it.
700 million in permitting.
New construction.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, new construction permitted. And conservatively, mm-hmm. that's probably $20 to $30 million of impact fee revenue uncollected. Mm-hmm. At a more robust impact fee schedule level, that might be $40 million. I mean, it's a lot of money. And I'd also like to point out that the Savannah College of Art and Design, as we all know, pays no property taxes. So the only mechanism that you currently have to try to level that playing field a little bit is an impact fee. And if you notice, your mayor slow rolled impact fees all the way, for the last 2 years, and your consultant came down, I think, in October, and you're just now getting together a advisory committee. Well, in the meantime, SCAD has permitted their 17-story dormitory on one side and their other mega project on the other side. So, I mean, how many times are you going to let the horse get out of the barn before you do something?
Right. And from day one, these are the type of policies inclusive of inclusionary zoning and new zone. We actually have all of this to discuss on our workshop this week. Alderwoman Lanier came out of the gate ready. Our first year in office, our first meeting, she was working with Pat Monahan and then Michael Brown and then Heath Lloyd and now Jay Melder. We've had 4 city managers in the 2 short years we've been in office. And so knowing the core of this work, Alderwoman Lanier, John mentioned SPLOST. We know that that is a revenue generator for special projects and such. And we want you to talk about the single largest project in the history of the city of Savannah in your district. But pick up where John is and lead us into some of these policies you have been championing, as well as what SPLOST has created in your district with the Arena project and how it's impacting or how it will impact the first district. And then, John, I know you have a lot to say about the Arena as well, and we'll pick up where Alderwoman Lanier leaves off.
Yes, Alderwoman, give me 1 minute. Let me plug in. I don't know if it's the storm or my connection here is going in and out, but I think if I plug in, I might be a little safer.
Okay.
So you and John can continue on. Give me 1 second. I'm going to.
Yeah. So you know that we had the opening of the Arena, and speaking of the single largest construction project in the history of Savannah, it is the Arena to the tune of $169 million, and that is inclusive of a parking lot that now is creeping up at $19 million. But it's a parking lot that you all haven't parked in yet, despite the fact that the arena has already opened. And despite the fact that we have not passed all code compliance, we have a temporary approval for entry. In addition, we have a concert coming up on Wednesday. And so, John,
Yes.
did you know that the contract we have with, I don't know if it's Chatham Steel or Tenenbaum, whoever owns it,
Yep.
I think those individuals are one and the same. Listen to this. It's a 5-year contract. The 5-year contract is a lease. We're not purchasing the land.
Right.
We are leasing the land to park. At the annex of the Civic Center is Chatham Steel's property. In leasing the property, they discovered some time ago that the property was unenvironmentally safe, sound. Therefore, the EPA stated before you park here, you have to mitigate that land. Well, initially, I was told that that mitigation was going to cost between $4 and $5 million. So I'm scratching my head. And I'm like, okay, so we're going to rent the land for 5 years, $5 million contract to lease it. And then we have to put an additional $5 million in to mitigate it. But guess what? That's not all, y'all. It's another approximately $5 million to develop it. We got to pave it and paint it. And so it gets worse. Listen to this. The contract started in 2021. It started last year. We started paying. We have paid on that lease. So, Alderwoman, can you tell me? I want you to pick up. I just kind of jumped around there, because that's my pet peeve. But in the end, somehow answer the question: are we going to recoup that year back at least? Go on with your policy presentation.
Yes, thank you, Alderwoman. You asked me to talk a little bit about this arena thing because there's so many different opinions and points of views concerning this arena. And let me tell you about mine. So I've been teaching asset-based economic development for about 18 years in Savannah, and it's a bottoms-up approach. So when I ran for office, I ran on these community beneficial strategic approach, which will include all of these best practices that we haven't been utilizing here in Savannah. We've been a little bit more developer centric. We've been really acquiescing to developers when a community benefit strategic approach really allows the citizens, who is the taxpayers and the stockholders, to be the primary stakeholder in all of this. So many years ago, the last generation on the west side of town, they advocated for a public investment. They understood that a public investment will draw private investment, and we had been under-invested in these corridors. That's why it's a low wealth area. That's why it's riddled with poverty, high and extreme poverty. So therefore, that last generation, they were very wise, and they knew that the city owed them a debt. These were the people who were the sharecroppers, who had ancestors had worked on these plantations on the west side, and the people who had supplied Savannah with moonshine during the days when downtown got very strong economically. So these people who were like the backbones of the local economy, and then it got to the point where the city is expanding and growing. And it needed to be an investment because of the extreme poverty in this area. And that investment came promised to the people, but it came in the form of an arena. They didn't necessarily advocate for an arena, but that's a public investment, the largest one that the city has ever made. So next generation, myself and others, we understood the business that we had to conduct community business, like corporate business, because we were promised so much for so long and hadn't gotten anything. So this arena is symbolic of a cash cow. This is an economic engine. This is our Atlanta airport. However, we had problems because this city had never been accustomed to making sure that the primary stakeholders, that the impacted people receive any kind of benefits. So it's been a fight, not only for the last 18 years in helping to shape the narrative, but in the last 2 years, especially because a lot of people would have been helped if some of these policies were in place. However, right now we have a new city manager who has a similar background of understanding how you create outcomes, how you design outcomes, how you design communities. So with the arena, now that it is built, and Alderwoman, we had to struggle to make sure that the local minority and disadvantaged contractors were included. Now, we were a little bit, our hands were a little bit tied there because the last council basically signed off on most of the contracts and made all of the promises economically on the building of the arena. And there was no goal as to include local and minority and disadvantaged businesses. So this council, and yesterday I said a clumsy council because we are stumbling into some good stuff. And this council placed a 25% goal in place. That's not a whole lot. It's not representative of the population. We have some work to do there. But I remember when we had 4 and 5 and 6% back in 2003 and 4. So we did that. But now that the arena is built and we wasn't able to totally make sure that return from that return happened from the construction, but the most important part where the work really is, where the rubber meets the road now, is putting the policies in place to protect the people who live in those areas, the owners and the renters, and to make sure that we entrepreneurial programs to have some new businesses and these policies to make sure when it comes to housing that we have not only workforce, but we have income base and low income housing available. And that's what these policies are supposed to do. Now, it's a low wealth area. However, the intent of the investment is to uplift the area. Just like people want to age in place, we're trying to create an opportunity for people to build wealth in place, build wealth in these low wealth communities by using this asset. And we could do that, and we could drive those outcomes. We could design those outcomes based on our policy.
And you are continuing, even with some of these pieces in place, when we talk about the DBEs and the MWBEs, we recognize that with those set-asides and those designations and the leverage that the developer used to get the contract, we since that time have had to still advocate for them to make good on what they agreed to via a contract. And so then you start to see the spirit and the intent of which these individuals go about. And that's why the struggle becomes so difficult. So like right now, take, for example, the depot that's there, or the market that we are seeking to establish. You have a plan. You have a strategic plan for that area that would serve as an economic driver for the residents in the area to be a part of that growth and development. But in short order, you have had to come in and fight against the maneuvering that's going on right now to have other people come in.
That's true. Although what we see happening is a cultural shift, a cultural change. This is so all brand new, and we're the right council for this coming on board and for creating these new policies to make sure. And what we're trying to do is make sure that the impacted people are included and receive benefits. And it's not exclusive to the impacted people. It's just that it's been so acceptable to leave people out, not only low wealth people. And look what happened downtown on Bull Street in the Victorian district. Those people weren't listened to. We have to create resident-driven, citizen-driven, stakeholder-driven, so we could get an equitable return on our public investment. And so this council some of us understand that. And so that's what the public see, because we're trying to do business differently. When we got elected, we said this won't be business as usual, because we did want to conduct community business like corporate business, because we need to hold people accountable. We need to be able to say, look, we got a CBA, a community benefit agreement, and it's a legal document, and we're holding you responsible for delivering A, B, C, D to this community. So that's what we are. If it's litigious, it's litigious, but everybody else getting something, the residents and the citizens and the stakeholders and the stockholders need to get a return on their public investment.
And you said something very key, John. She acknowledged that this council came in with a spirit to get this type of work done. Only in short order find that we now are in the minority. Alderwoman Bryant Lanier and Miller Blakely and myself are essentially those who are sticking to what we stated on the campaign trail. And I can tell you, for the most part, all of our stump speeches and campaign pledges were consistent with the direction the electorate spoke, in that in 2019, they sent an indictment across this county, across this city, that had never happened in the history of Savannah. I would even venture to say the history of our region and our state, and that a nearly entire council was voted out and a new one was shepherded in. To me, that spoke volume. That was an indicator that the citizens of Savannah no more wanted to do business as usual and wanted to move away from status quo politics, invest more in flesh and blood in our communities and less in brick and mortar. But I feel like right now, and we're going to jump into our visioning session we had today, we are a carbon copy of what was done in the previous administration. And that's really, really painful. So what we want to do now, there's thought that we haven't achieved or we haven't accomplished anything. We actually have. It's just that the media won't focus on that. They won't focus on the fact that we were successful in getting nearly $1 million devoted to our Little League football team and recreation, so that we are backdooring our way into averting crime and violence among our youth. They won't report that we were successful. For the first time, I advocated very vigorously for our nonprofit community, in that they who applied received 100% of exactly what they asked for. So we are doing a lot. We're still looking out for those marginalized communities in our city. Alderwoman Lanier, I want to give you a stab at just acknowledging some of the pieces that you've been able to get over the plate. She's far more strategic than I am. She's far more savvy than I am, because for where I'm sitting, I don't feel like I need to collaborate and negotiate when I'm only concerned about eradicating our streets of homelessness, erasing the number of citizens we have dying on the streets of Savannah, making sure we have affordable housing. Those are just tenets that we all should be interested in. So if I don't have a friend who's a developer or a contractor or who does business with the city, what am I negotiating for? What is my trade-off going to be for advocating for the homeless community? Like, really? Lanier, what are some of those things you hit over the box? And then, John, you chime in there.
Well, in terms of service delivery, we have really been working to get the citizens to use the 311 system, so we will know if it was working. And based on more people calling into the 311 system and us tracking service requests, now we are getting better responses. So that's a good thing. But when it comes to policy, and that's where most of the work needs to be done on the west side. We are considering a community benefit agreement. We're looking at inclusionary zoning, of course, like you mentioned, and we're also looking at we're talking to the state partners, our legislators, about certain things that we as a council do not control when it comes to exemptions and rent management. But that's just a conversation that's probably needs to happen a few years before it gets any traction, if it gets any traction. But it's happening in other places around the country, and so that's why we placed that there. And so we're hoping to have some type of litter pilot or trash pilot we've been trying to advocate for a while. And then so we see little pieces of this in some of the plans that are going out in the budget for this year. So we're making some progress, but we have a lot more work to be done in terms of creating more policies that will provide equity for low wealth citizens.
John, chime in there.
Yeah, I have two questions, and Councilwoman Lanier, has the first community benefits agreement ever been passed and adopted by this council?
No, with Pat Monahan, he gave the directive to for staff to start working on it, and they did. And when Mr. Brown came in, he gave the directive for them to stop, and they did. And so we have picked it back up under Mr. Melder, and staff is working on it now, and they'll have something to come before council soon. We
Okay,
understand.
well, I had to ask that because I think I knew the answer to it, but I wanted the viewers to understand you have been completely faithful, completely committed, and constant in your confidence and belief in community benefit agreement. And yet, to this day, the first one has not been done. I think that's no fault of yours, but I think somebody's getting slow rolled, and the West Side is getting slow rolled, as well as any other neighborhood that would benefit from community benefits agreement. I just want to say it's a beautiful concept, and you've worked very hard at it, and I wish you much success in getting that passed. But at this point, I would have thought that council and various city managers would have seen the wisdom of your plan and advocacy and cooperated and made it happen. I'm sorry it hasn't happened yet. I know you'll keep working on it. Okay, my second question is the arena opening is all-consuming and very celebratory, as well it should be. It's a project that's took 20 years to manifest, but I think we can all agree that once the newness and the pizzazz of this facility passes, the long-term success of this venue hinges on the Canal District. And the Canal District, for your viewers, is basically the geographic area from the west side where the arena is located at Stiles and Gwinnett, the rest of the territory all the way out to MLK and the connection to downtown. Mm-hmm. This is the Canal District. My understanding is the Canal District will probably exceed the cost of the arena. So where
we haven't talked about that. That's an unfunded project.
Well,
so where would that come from?
Exactly where I'm going with this is what does the new city manager Jay Melder say about funding that integral component to make the arena successful? Because without it, it's going to be a real struggle. And what's the inside track, ladies, on the Canal District?
Well, the Canal District is an unfunded project. All of the land within the Canal District does not belong to the city. It's not owned by the city, but they own substantial properties, especially their west arena. And we haven't discussed what the plans for that property will be. However, the housing authority, the large hotel district, is one and the same as Caton Home and Fraser Home and Yamacross. So all of that abuts the Canal District and will be impacted. And that property, if they drew the large hotel district right there next to the arena in the Canal District, and then you can see what that master plan is going to be for that area. But the city, of course, will be responsible for infrastructure, which is going to be very expensive to have the proper infrastructure when it comes to drainage and and we know the problems we can have with the drainage there. So when we're talking about impact fees, um, they should apply and offset some of the costs, and we need to be
Sure.
looking for some more outside revenue.
Perfect example of where impact fees would help fund part of what is sure to be 150 to $200 million unfunded project. Now, I promise me you'll have a community benefits agreement signed and passed before that canal district work starts.
We can't make that promise because we're in the minority. I mean, if it's the political will, this is what I want the public to understand and know. We want to dial this information down to the least common denominator. I've had to have it dialed down to the least common denominator so that I could understand it. And bless God for Alderwoman Lanier and for John, who serve as good educators where this work is concerned. Listen, this is important. It's important that you all understand what we are embarking upon and how it will impact our community. And while you do not live on the West Side, and for those of you, especially those of you in Carver Village, Brickyard, and Cloverdale, it is incumbent upon you to stay the course, engage, and make demands where this area is concerned. I don't know about you, but the demography of the city of Savannah is changing so rapidly.
Okay,
It's not just about black and white. It's about the everyday working citizen. In 5 to 7 years, if something doesn't change in Savannah, if you don't have a leader who's going to come in and help shepherd the way where these policies are concerned, Savannah, as we know her today, will be a thing of the past for minorities, for African Americans, and for the working class citizen of any hue.
John? I appreciate your over the horizon philosophy and perspective, but let me ask a couple of basic reality-based questions. Community benefits agreements. This council has had 2 years of education on it and discussion. In the case of the mayor, he's had 16 years?
18.
Okay. Does Curtis Purty not support community benefits agreements?
I would think that
not support community benefits agreements as an economic policy to help move the city forward?
He didn't support putting you on a committee for the impact fees, and you serve as one of the most knowledgeable persons in our city right now who is not a part of that establishment.
Yeah, but I speak too freely and irritated him. That's a personal problem. That's okay.
It's not personal. It's not personal. That the answer to that question is the same reason why you were not selected to the committee and why Alderwoman Lanier has not been able to get that CBO to see the light of day.
I'm just asking who amongst your colleagues is opposing community benefits agreements?
Let me say this, because we haven't established the ordinance yet, but I have seen a change in behavior among council, because several of the council members have created the neighborhood agreement, which is the precursor to the community benefit agreement, and dealing with their citizens and development in their community. So they are embracing the concept. Now, in the first district, we have people ready to come and do business and locate near these neighborhoods. And we're having that conversation with them as far as what type of benefits will you provide. And these people are jumping on board and agreeing to help support neighborhood organizations, little league teams, and helping to support the CDC. These people are ready to embrace the concept, but we don't have a policy yet that manages it. But of course, that's not a requirement, because a developer, a business, and a community could enter into agreement together without the city. But of course, we know if it's a large scale development, it works better when the city is
Of
in there
course.
as helping to negotiate and facilitate the process, not
So
make
so
decisions.
so to use one of your terms, John, it's the slow roll. And we know that we are creeping up on an election season. So it's incumbent upon those individuals, Alderwoman Lanier, to right now get it in order or to start having those sound bites that sound like they have it in order. But what we don't want the public to miss is the fact that we have been in office for 2 years. And this has been a goal from day one for Alderwoman Lanier.
I
And it
understand.
hasn't seen the light of day.
How long did it take the Rockingham Farm seeded deal to get through?
Now we
It was
did that our
record. It was
second
like-
month.
It
Our
was like
second
light
month.
speed.
Yes.
It was like Buck Rogers. I mean, it happened.
Well,
how
and
long did it-
it's just like with what is it, Alderwoman Lanier? I would say between the months of November of 2021 and January of 2022, we permitted for developers almost 1,000 units or more that are not affordable here in the city of Savannah,
and no
from
community
the-
benefit agreement.
Oglethorpe Mall to all over the city to downtown. And so my question was, at what juncture are we going to meet and rival the speed of which we permit developers for housing that's not affordable for housing that is attainable for our citizens?
Or warehousing. Why does that get fast tracked? Why does that get almost instantaneous annexation and bonding and a pillow, a chocolate on the pillow, but something like the 165 million that went in the arena without community benefits agreement? That ought to be a lesson that we missed. And before the Canal District kicks off, that ought to be in place. And
Of course,
I got to say it. I mean, aluminum cups happened mighty quick. Not that that was significant, okay, because that wasn't significant. But big stuff like this that is part of the structural iron of the architecture of making a better city, be it impact fees or community benefit agreements. I mean, that's the future and the corrective policy to level the playing field and get away from business as usual. So
of course, one of our most critical needs in the city is that for affordable housing. But like the older woman said, we were approving so many houses that were more or less high end market rate, but they those developers were within their rights. They were legally had the ability to do that. So we could not really deny them because the city did not have their policies in place, but we really could have benefited from if those policies were already in place. Especially over there on the east side, those condos, we could have required something, but we have no policy. So,
well, Brunetta, let me ask you: has staff cooperated with you and done the requisite analysis and study on the concept of community benefits agreements and helped you get it on the launch pad?
yes,
Are you
they were
ready?
excited. Staff was excited because it was a challenge because they know in their discipline this is something cutting edge and this is best practice, and so they were excited to work on it. But they work under the directive of management.
Mm-hmm. And so we were in Atlanta last week for Chatham Savannah Day. It was our invitation to come and be a part of the legislative action there at the Capitol. We were fortunate to have some FaceTime with the new mayor, Dickens, is it? And his staff. And this was the staff specifically who worked, what was the department, Alderwoman Lanier? They worked on the inclusionary zoning and
Yes, they were the planning department.
planning department. I didn't know if they called their department the same as we call ours, but one of the things I questioned, they did a great job in their presentation and explaining and demonstrating for us, what they had done in Atlanta, what their pitfalls were, what their successes are. And so with that, I sat there and I was in pain because all I could think about is when these policies and the presentations of such were first presented here in Savannah and how it was shot down city manager after city manager and how it was not supported by the majority on council. And then further, I became disappointed recognizing that there probably is going to be the intention of developers to race and get all of their work done before this policy will ever see the light of day. And then thereby we would have a missed opportunity. So I asked the question, what would you recommend we do in order to protect ourselves and preserve or some semblance of resource from an opportunity like this? And the young lady said straight away, she said, it's really aggressive and it's not popular, but we would establish a moratorium. And I just don't think that we have the political will to do that, because when you look at the campaign contributions and you see that the developers and the attorneys that the developers hire are the campaign contributors of our sitting elected officials. And so that's what we are up against. And that's
the DNA. It's the DNA of this city. I understand every election cycle, the builders and developers pour tons of money, like Kessler did. I mean, he maxed out to everybody on Eddie's council. Okay. But it's more than that. It is that, but there's a 300-year history of the business community controlling policy in Savannah.
Mm-hmm.
So you're fighting ingrained psychology and practice that Atlanta at least has the energy and the enthusiasm and makes things change. We talk about changing things, but we never change them.
It's the smoke. It's the smoke and mirrors. It's the gaslighting. John, you know what? I appreciate you recognizing the obvious. And this oftentimes is what we are up against. I know that because of who we are as women, with our brilliance and our beauty and our I gotta claim it. I gotta preach my own self happy. I gotta preach my own self happy. Have you seen the news as of late? Right? I gotta build myself up. And so oftentimes we get held to a higher standard and more is expected of us. But you recognizing the obvious is what I want people to see more of and see less of holding us to this higher standard where we are just railing against the grain, railing against the system.
You're not complaining just to complain.
Right.
You're making your statements and expending your energy to improve things. And that's noble, that's worthy, and shame on them for diminishing that and distracting the public. The purpose of your show is not for us three, who are all good friends, to talk about stuff we already know. I mean, we could do that, at the coffee shop or over breakfast. The purpose of your show is to educate the viewers, to understand what's happening, and when stuff isn't happening, why it's not happening. So I salute your show, all the ATR network programming. Jim Maricas at the Savannian is a true North Star for telling the truth, not being afraid, not being beholden to campaign contributions or advertisers. Better Savannah. We have some unity, and it needs to be better coordinated, more focused. But you're doing a great job. There's a lot of people that see that.
Yeah. Well, and the other purpose of the show, John, for me, in addition to the education piece, is also to equalize the narrative that play out in the airways and in our local papers, as well as get ahead of it. because for a great number of people, they rely on just one source of news and one source of media. And that's why we are happy that shows like Better Savannah and ATR and For Us By Us exist, so that we are giving our listening audience an alternative to what's being demonstrated in our airways. Like, take for example, I got to put this jab out there, Bernetta. I just happened to glimpse the 6 o'clock news for WTOC, and every single council person, they show every single council person except for me. I thought, how glaring and how obvious can we be here? But it's okay. And speaking of the visioning session, John, you attended our first visioning session. And
all 3 days. You
came for both days.
Yeah.
Alderwoman Lanier, I forgot it was 2 days the first year we did it. We were only down to 1 day from 9 to 3, and we had to commit to that meeting like right away. I mean, we just got back from Atlanta from a 3-day session, and come home to go to this Monday morning meeting, and we have our city council meeting on Thursday. What the rush was to acknowledge that we have 105 items from last year, and of those 105 items, we have 20, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. Of those 105 items we worked on almost 2 years ago, only 28 have been checked off. And of those 28, I can tell you it's very, very questionable. And so again,
and they're probably low-hanging, easily accomplished things.
Well, and the other thing is that we noted was that the items that have not been checked off, among them are the items that myself, Alderwoman Lanier, and Alderwoman Blakely have on here, because we're not in the majority with that 5 votes that it takes to get an item on the agenda or on a workshop. Yeah. And someone actually had the nerve to acknowledge that in the meeting today. And so then we start to see examples of voter suppression when we as sitting alderwomen are not able to carry the interest of the people who we represent, particularly us at large representatives. And so we want you all to pay close attention. I wanted to go through some of this tonight, but we kind of ate up a whole bunch of time, and I don't want to hold people too terribly long. Alderwoman Lanier is like me. We don't like doing these things. We do it because we have to. And John, I thank you for committing with short notice. But listen, we want to continuously acknowledge that we are here to advocate for you, to educate you, not to the extent that you don't know something, but our education comes from the perspective of opening the door and expressing to you that which we are exposed to at the table. And then we want to further inspire you. We want to inspire you to engage and be a part of the political process. If you love Savannah like I do, and you want for her to continue to be her home, we are at a juncture where it is necessary that we all get involved and stay engaged, because it's really that serious. We are on the slippery slope to losing her. Mm-hmm. So with that said, I want to say to you all, good night, and thank you so much for joining me. And I'm sure I'll be back on some live somewhere. In the meantime, I love you, Savannah, and have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.